Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on integrating your planning and risk management processes. It's great to have you all here today, and we're really hoping that you'll get some great takeaways from the session today. We're really pleased to be able to commence what is going to be a webinar series around the best way for organisations to bring together really important processes around strategy, planning, performance measurement and monitoring, and enterprise risk management, and all that goes with that into a coherent framework that really drives strong business performance and resilience within the organization. So it's fantastic that so many of you have been able to attend today. We're really excited, and we're really pleased to be in a position where we're going to be running this through our ever evolving and improving CAMS College platform, which continues to deliver great value to customers on an ongoing basis through an online vehicle and an on-demand platform. So that's a great approach, a great initiative, and it's been really pleasing to be working with so many customers in driving value to their organisations and also providing value to those businesses. What we're going to be covering today is a high-level overview of our webinar series, covering all of the key topics that we want to delve into in a lot of detail and give really pragmatic value-added tips to your business. And as part of this webinar, what we'll cover is a range of discrete topics that will, in and of themselves, will form specific episodes within this webinar series and really give you an opportunity to not just get a high level understanding of the concept, but to be able to understand it in a bit more detail and apply it in a practical and pragmatic way. What are we going to cover in today's session? So first and foremost, how we integrate our strategic and operational management frameworks with our enterprise risk management frameworks. And at what points do we intersect the different processes, both conceptually in terms of the nature of those areas, but also in relation to the business processes that take place within an organisation. So there's great opportunities for synergies across the board, and for both of these frameworks and business processes to reinforce one another and engage with our people within our businesses. We're going to talk a lot about how we drive the execution on risk management and strategy management and integrate those two processes and frameworks, and physically how we actually go about integrating them from a systems point of view as well. So there's some great tips and tricks around how to do that. In addition to that, really a strong focus of our webinar series is going to be on reducing the duplication across both of the processes and really making sure that you can streamline and get value and leverage both the strategic planning framework and also the risk management framework from a business efficiency point of view. Monitoring, reporting, and progress. So what we always find with, and I'm sure many of you will be all too familiar with, is organizations with different stakeholders, different audiences, different lenses that they're applying to certain concepts, when really there are ways in which we can manage that data in a more effective way and reduce the reporting burden on people, but and also deliver greater value to the relevant stakeholders, whether it's our executive teams, whether it's individual management areas, whether it's boards, committees, external stakeholders. There's some really great benefits to be had by tying these processes together. And critically as well, how do we drive and incorporate risk into our planning processes, into our performance, and how do we build that risk-aware culture so organizations can take advantage of the opportunities that are presenting themselves, that they can manage and mitigate effective risks, that they can put in place without disrupting the business in a negative way, really more so in a much more positive context. So these are some of the topics that we'll be covering today, but also in a much more in-depth and pragmatic fashion through a series of additional webinars on specific topics.
A way of determining how far progressed you are in relation to integrating your risk management approach with planning in the organisation is to have a look at a risk management maturity model. And on the screen, we've got quite a simple model. There are much more detailed models that can orient you as to where you are in that risk management integration journey. So looking at left to right, typically we come across organisations that may be still at the fragmented stage, certainly in parts of the organisation, where risk may be defined differently at different levels or across the organisation. In that sense, it's more managed as silos rather than an enterprise approach. And there's limited alignment of risks to strategy in terms of the strategic plan and incorporation of things like risk management actions in business plans. So it's just not happening. And at best, there's a disparate monitoring and reporting going on against risk. And as you progress across the page, across the management, the maturity model, you're looking at top-down approaches, which are resulting in more of an enterprise-wide approach to identification and assessment of risks, management of risks. You've got some knowledge sharing going on in relation to risk management through to an integrated approach where you really are starting to get a coordinated effort across the organisation structure and through the organisation structure in terms of integration with planning and performance. Through to a risk intelligent organisation where not only are you integrating with those planning processes, but you're actually getting building that into your strategic and business planning approaches, be they reviews or building of new business plans moving into for the following financial year. You've also got clear linkages into the performance management framework. So you're picking up and linking KPIs, sometimes referred to as key risk indicators, that are connecting in at the strategic level and also the operational levels.
Thanks, Brad. So if we're looking at integrating our risk management, planning and performance frameworks, where do we need to begin? Many of you might have a enterprise risk management framework that's documented based on ISO 31000, outlines our risk appetite, outlines a range of guidelines and frameworks around our system. So that might already be in place, and many of you may already have an integrated planning and performance management framework. And some of you have got an integrated planning and performance and risk management framework that's already in place. If you're missing any of those items, then the first place to start when we're looking at integrating our planning, our performance management, our risk management, and much of our organizational reporting is to design and develop an integrated enterprise planning and performance and risk management framework. On the screen, I guess conceptually what we're looking at here is an approach, a high-level approach that talks about the formulation of risks, talks about the formulation of strategic plans, and does it in an integrated way so that you can see where the integration touch points are. This is just one example, something that we're going to talk a lot more about in an upcoming webinar series. But what you can take from this is that clearly in this example, when we're looking at formulating our strategic risk registers, when we're looking at formulating our operational threats, one key example here is that within the system, you can see through a board process or through a enterprise management process, we're actually undertaking the identification and analysis of our environment, incorporating risks at the same time as that we're developing our strategic goals. So any strategic planning process, people would understand that that part of that is doing the environmental scan. During that process, is opportunities, threats, etc., come out of that process. So this is a great example of how we can bring together the business processes and practices where we're actually saying, yeah, let's undertake our strategic planning and visioning process. Let's take account of the environment we're in. When we're doing that, we're actually pulling out the first part of our risk management process. So we don't need to necessarily, from a risk identification process, we don't necessarily need to undertake a discrete risk identification process outside of the strategic planning process. We can actually draw upon this process, provided that we've incorporated some of the steps and thought processes into it, to pull out the risk identification and then build that into the next stages in our process and workflow. So that's just one example within a strategic planning and performance management framework where you can get greater value by bringing those two things together. And if you look at this broader framework, there's a great number of different areas where in the process and in the practice, we can actually leverage thinking from different lenses to populate the organizational data and then make sure that the organization is not duplicating across the board, and we're thinking about it in an open way. But we'll talk more about that in the upcoming webinar, but hopefully you can understand the concept there in terms of bringing these two things together. We'll take you through a lot more in our next episode. Thanks, Brad.
One of the components of the CAMS risk tool that's sometimes overlooked is the ability to link risk treatment actions into the business plan, either at an action level or at a task level. If there's an existing action that really is apparent, and this is more of a task that sits below that. So let's just have a look at how you might approach that. Obviously, for clients who only have CAMS risk, this is not possible without strategy. But if you do have strategy and are perhaps not undertaking this currently, we'll just quickly have a look how you would go about that. So we've done our control grid assessment, looked at effectiveness ratings, come up with a residual risk impact rating, which is out of appetite. We've elected to further treat the risk, and we have a couple of risk treatment actions that have been identified. You see just below that risk action plan grid is an add to business or strategic plan. If we just click that, we're presented with the organisation planning structure, the very same one that you're going to have in CAMS strategy if you have that tool as well. In this case, we're going to link it down through the goal to strategy level, and we're going to further link down to, in this case, action, which already exists, and we're going to treat this more as a task for that action. So you'll see I've already linked this, review the investment strategy, by dragging and dropping to that action, and it will then be able to pick up that linked solution. And if I just switch to a view in CAMS strategy now, so we're looking at the action sitting in CAMS strategy review, revenue generating activities, and there is my linked task. So it's now, by virtue of that, linked into that particular action and linked back to the appropriate service and department, so it becomes part of that department or business unit's plan.
So moving past reporting and providing the right level of information on our progress to achieve our strategic objectives, to mitigate risk or take advantage of opportunity, one of the most exciting areas we're looking at and evolving with all of our customers at the moment is around analytics and enhancing the way in which we provide the linkage between our key risk indicators, our key performance indicators, and also the analytics side of things. So when we're looking at reporting, particularly in the context of a lot of our work with digital reporting, what you can see is that the linkages here to a strategic outcome or goal or key result area is being linked through to the execution. So what is it that we're actually doing to achieve that particular outcome, and how are we tracking and measuring that? Expanding on our risk and our quantification and our analysis is is the ability now to bring together the qualitative components of a strategic execution reporting process and a risk management process, but then tie that in to analytics. And this is a really exciting part of what we're doing at the moment. There's a unique ability within the CAM suite to actually tie these two things together in a simple way and make it meaningful for end users. So in this example, we've got a risk indicator or a KPI that is being tracked and monitored and reported on a monthly basis up through the streams. But further to that, if we want to drill down and have a look at the analytics, it's all in one place. So we can have people drill in and say, well, look, this key risk indicator, I can see that it's off track or on track in relation to what we're hoping to achieve. Tell me more about why that is and what that's about. So the integration point here, and there's some really great data modeling from our team. When we start to talk about how we pull that information, how we determine what information we're pulling into the system, it really is providing a huge amount of added value, and then tying that back to our high level reporting so that we can really have, if we need to, we can have near real time data that is accessible at the fingertips, contextualize at a high level of KPI data, and we can really find out what's going on very quickly in a digital context. So that's really where we're going with some of the analytics. We're really looking forward to delving into that in a lot more detail, how you might set that up, what's involved, what items we need to look at in terms of data cleansing, data preparation, how it's transformed, all of that information, how you actually execute that through your business. There's so much to do, but the benefits are really amazing, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you soon.
There's a lot of talk in the risk world about developing a risk-aware culture, and I guess in progressing that journey across the risk maturity model that we were looking at earlier, how does a risk-aware culture fit in with that journey? It's a question that we often get asked at CAMS. In our experience, it takes a number of components to come together, and over a period of time, and with commitment ultimately at all levels. So it's not just a leadership driven approach, but it's really about building capacity and commitment at different levels. And so there's a series of behaviours on this slide, as well as you can see, as you move around the model, it needs to be supported with having the right integrated planning, performance and GRC framework in place. It needs to have systems integration, access to the right data and analysis, the appropriate communication, training support and resourcing to build and support that capacity. And it also needs a degree of challenging and empowering people if you're expecting them to take ownership and accountability for their risks, for their risk treatment actions, or their controls in this process. So it's no one thing, and culture is not something you can just work on in isolation. In our experience, it needs to bring all of these elements together. And as you move across that risk management journey, paying attention to all of these aspects.
So thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. I hope you're able to get a clear understanding of some of the high-level concepts that we are really keen to explore in more detail with you over the coming webinar series. We will be sending out some additional context and information around when you might be able to attend these specifically. We'd be really keen to get some feedback on key areas that you think are more important, areas that we can drill into in a lot more detail and prioritize across the spectrum of integrated planning and performance. We love the feedback, positive or constructive feedback that will help us evolve this webinar series on an ongoing basis. The delivery of this will be for CAMS College customers. They will be able to access the webinar through the CAMS College on an ongoing basis. There will be the general series will be made available through that platform. We are including some additional content and additional tools and tips around this subject matter within the CAMS College offering. So make sure you have a look at that. And in the meantime, stay safe. We're looking forward to catching up with you. And thanks so much again for your interest in this topic area, in this webinar series. Have a great day. Talk soon.